Okay, hi and welcome to the reading guide for chapter 17. So just to put this in context, we're reading the systems view in order to understand the opposition between a mechanistic view of life with the systems view of life, so as to understand the contemporary problems, the political problems of our society that this course addresses from a philosophical viewpoint. Now, chapter 17 really goes to the heart of that. It does so in two ways. The first way is to show that problems are interconnected. They depend upon one another in negative feedback loops. The interconnectedness of problems is the first main theme of this chapter. The second main theme is a common root of those problems. And they claim, the authors Capra and Luisi claim that this common root is the idea of growth. The idea that perpetual growth is possible on a finite planet. Infinite growth on a finite planet is impossible. That's the claim. We're going to be looking at further conditions. So this is really not the only root problem that we'll be looking at throughout this course. And it's interesting to see how they're almost contradicting themselves when they say that there's one root cause to a panoply of problems. Because really the systems view should show that underneath the problems are other interconnected causes, and that's what we'll be doing more. For instance, or most importantly, we'll be looking at the idea of the human being, human nature, the individual, and how that is defined, and how that problem is also a root problem of the things that we're reading about in the systems view. Nonetheless, chapter 17 has some very, very important insights about the interconnectedness of problems and their root causes in a specific idea of growth. So let's look a bit at how that works. You have a beautiful map of unlimited growth on a finite planet. If you want to see how the dots are connected, that's really where they do that. They bring back the idea of perpetual growth to the core mechanism of the economy. The core mechanism of the economy is that money is produced through loans and investments that need that have interests that need to be paid. In order to pay those interests, quantitative growth is necessary. So quantitative growth is the root cause of climate change, and the cause of perpetual growth is the build-up of the economy. Okay? So the way that money works, the way that money is created, necessitates perpetual growth, which in turn necessitates climate change. That makes the problem quite complicated because the financial sector is complex and is not something that we can just abandon and create something new. But that's what they're arguing that we have to do. And I think they do so very persuasively. I think they're right about that. It's just a very complex problem. Okay, so the interconnectedness of quantitative growth, climate change, and the way that money is produced is the central idea. You'll find it on 367. You should also, as you're reading, always when you're reading more complex things, you should look at the oppositions. So one thing up against another. On 368, we get quantitative and qualitative growth. We get different ideas of development and different ideas of growth. Let me say a word about quantitative and qualitative growth. Qualitative growth is what we see when we have a sustainable interaction of within an environment. So take photosynthesis as an example. Green plants take up carbon dioxide and give away oxygen. Now the oxygen recreates the environment that reproduces the carbon dioxide which the green plants need in order to produce oxygen. I mean, this is very simplified, of course, but you see the idea of circularity, where you, in a qualitative growth, you reproduce the conditions under which you produce. Quantitative growth, to the contrary, uses up the resources that it needs in order to produce, and produces waste, and then needs more resources. So you have this kind of linear system where you constantly need more and more and more of fossil fuels. So you use fracking, you drill in the Arctic because you simply need more. You're not reproducing the conditions for your production. That's quantitative growth. Qualitative growth is based on interconnectedness, where what is good for the producer is also good for the conditions for the production. See what I mean? That's quantitative and qualitative growth. Try to really understand these oppositions. That's always a good way to approach any subject. So let me actually leave you with that idea, and just call your attention to the basics of climate change science on 387. Read it through so you have the basics. It's it's just important to know, even though this is not a science class. It's important to understand the basic scientific facts. From a philosophical perspective, which leads back to the introduction of the systems view, is that climate change science is highly complex and exact predictions are very difficult. That's a quote on 387, box 17.1. So this is the thing that climate deniers always use. They say, oh, this stuff, look, they're contradicting each other. The one is saying 2 degrees in 50 years. The other is saying 5 degrees in 60 years. That doesn't contradict the fact of climate change. The details are fuzzy by nature. So we learned in the beginning that the scientific method doesn't produce exact truths. It produces approximations. The full picture is too complex for us to map. We don't know what the world in 50 years is going to look like. There are simply too many variables. What we do know is that the way that we are organizing global production is changing the climate. That's the bottom line. Which means that we have to change that. In order to change that, we have to look at the conditions under which those problems occur. And that's what this chapter is doing. That's what we're doing in this course. And that's what I have for you on chapter 17. Let's see what you all have to say about it. Thanks a lot. Remember to ask any questions that you might have, post them in the forum, and good luck.